The WNBA and its owners have sent a proposal to the union. After 6 weeks of seeing Nneka Ogwumike show up on the caller ID and just letting the phone ring, after 6 weeks of receiving text messages from the players union and leaving them on red, after 6 weeks of email after email after email after email, and the owners saying, gosh, these chicks are annoying. Finally, they said, you know what? Let's just throw something together real quick.
6 weeks. That's how long the WNBA owners let the phone ring. December rolled into January. January became February. And the entire time, the players' union kept reaching out. Emails sent. Text messages delivered. Calls placed. All of it met with the same response. Nothing. Not, we're working on it. Not, we'll circle back soon. Just cold, calculated silence. The kind that tells you everything before a single word gets spoken. 42 days of radio silence while the union kept knocking on a door that never opened.
That the WNBA has submitted a new proposal today to the WNBPA, as expected following Monday's meeting. The WNBA Players Association initially submitted a proposal around Christmas that the league had yet to formally respond to until today. They sent a proposal around Christmas, and here we are 1 week out from Valentine's Day, and the league said, all right, just send them something.
And then, just as the calendar crept toward Valentine's Day, the league finally decided it was time to respond. But here's the thing, it didn't feel like progress. It felt like someone remembered they had homework due and threw something together at the last minute. The proposal that landed wasn't polished. It wasn't fresh. It felt dusted off, barely updated, and sent out because ignoring people had finally become more inconvenient than pretending to engage. This wasn't a negotiation. This was a power move. Because when you disappear for 6 weeks during supposedly critical talks, you're not confused about the timeline. You're making a statement. You're reminding the other side who controls the clock, who decides what's urgent, and who gets forced to sit and wait. Real collaboration doesn't look like ghosting. When both sides actually want to get somewhere, there's constant contact. You're trading language. You're arguing over details. You're clarifying terms even when it gets tense. The back and forth never stops because progress requires friction. But that's not what happened here.
It would soon have a new proposal on a collective bargaining agreement. It came Friday evening. When the WNBA submitted its latest proposal to the union, a source told ESPN, confirming news first reported by the Associated Press. This ended a more than 6-week wait from the Players Association for a counter to its latest offer. Players waking up every day. Did they respond yet? No. Hey, just checking in. Any update? It wasn't immediately known what the league's new offer.
Here, what happened was a deliberate freeze, a message delivered without words, and the players felt every second of it. Each day that passed without a response was another reminder that leverage in this fight wasn't sitting on both sides of the table. It was concentrated in one place, and everyone knew it. Now, to be fair, we still don't know everything that's in the league's latest offer. The full breakdown hasn't leaked. The union is keeping quiet while they review the document, which is smart. That's how you handle sensitive negotiations. But we're not flying completely blind here. We know what the previous proposal looked like. We know the owners already put dozens of upgrades on the table, real, tangible improvements that go way beyond symbolic gestures. We're talking about salary structures that could push max contracts into completely different territory. We're talking about charter flights becoming standard instead of a luxury. We're talking about protections for pregnant players, developmental roster spots, and quality of life changes that address real problems. So the 6-week silence wasn't because the league had nothing to offer. It was because they already believed they'd offered plenty. And that belief, whether you agree with it or not, is what made them comfortable going dark. From their perspective, the ball was in the union's court. From the union's perspective, they were being ignored and disrespected. And that gap between how each side sees the same situation is exactly why we're staring down a potential crisis with the season just weeks away. Here's what a lot of people don't understand about negotiation tactics in professional sports. Silence isn't passive, it's a weapon. And the WNBA owners knew exactly what they were doing when they let those 42 days roll by without a single formal response.
revenue sharing in their effort to strike a new CBA. We get it, revenue sharing. We get it. If that's the only key issue, well, just say that's the only key issue. Not few key issues. It's the only key issue. The WNBA, the owners, they've given them everything else but the 30%. That's all they want. It's just the 30%. The CBA is supposed to begin May 8th. The season is supposed to begin May 8th, but an expansion draft, free agency, and a rookie draft also need to happen before the league tips off. Ogumake said once revenue sharing is solved,
This wasn't confusion. It wasn't bureaucratic delay. It was deliberate. When you're negotiating in good faith, even when things are tense, you keep the line open. You acknowledge receipt. You ask clarifying questions. You push back on specific points. You do something to show the conversation is alive. But when you want to send a message about who holds the power, you do exactly what the league did. You go completely silent and let the other side feel the weight of waiting. Think about what that does psychologically. Every morning, union leadership wakes up checking for updates. Every afternoon, players are asking if there's been movement. Every evening ends with the same answer: nothing yet. That uncertainty doesn't just frustrate people, it exhausts them. It creates doubt. It makes some players start wondering if holding out is really worth it. And that's the point. Because while the union was out there organizing player meetings, gathering feedback, and trying to build solidarity, the owners were doing something even more strategic. Absolutely nothing. They weren't scrambling. They weren't panicking. They were sitting back, watching the calendar tick closer to May, and betting that the pressure would eventually shift away from them and onto the players who actually need the season to start. It's the same tactic you see in corporate standoffs and labor disputes across every major sport. The side with deeper pockets and more time can afford to wait. They can let the silence stretch because they're not the ones losing sleep over missed paychecks or shortened careers. The players, on the other hand, are watching their window close. Every day without a deal is a day closer to potentially losing games, losing visibility, and losing the momentum the league finally built last season. So when the proposal finally dropped late on a Friday evening in mid-February, it wasn't because the league suddenly had a breakthrough. It was because the silence had done its job. The union had spent 6 weeks in limbo.
his previous offer last month would guarantee a maximum salary of $1 million in 2026. That could reach 1.3 through revenue sharing. That's up from the current $249,000 and could grow to nearly $2 million over the life of the agreement. That was on slides that were presented to players at Money Meeting and obtained by ESPN and other outlets. The slides also outlined 37 areas where the league was willing to make concessions that players wanted. Some of these proposals included adding 2 developmental player slots to teams, giving pregnant players the right to refuse trades, which I think is huge, actually.
And now the owners were ready to remind them what was actually on the table and what the cost of rejecting it might be. Let's talk about what the league already put on the table before this latest proposal. Because the numbers aren't small and the changes aren't cosmetic. This isn't a situation where the owners are offering a 2% raise and calling it progress. We're talking about a complete restructuring of how players get paid and how they experience life as professional athletes. Start with the salary jump. Right now, the max contract in the WNBA sits at around $249,000. Not terrible, but not exactly reflective of what elite athletes should be earning in a league that's finally gaining real traction. The league's proposal would push that max to over $1 million in the first year of the new deal. And if the revenue-sharing mechanisms kick in the way they're structured, that number climbs even higher, potentially reaching $1.3 million in year 1 and approaching $2 million by the end of the agreement. That's not a bump. That's a completely different financial reality for top-tier players. But it's not just about the stars. The proposal reportedly includes raising minimum salaries across the board, which matters for the majority of players who aren't household names. It's about making the league a viable, full-time career for more than just the top 15 players. It's about creating a path where you don't have to go overseas every offseason just to make rent. Then there's the travel situation, which has been a sore spot for years. The league is offering to codify charter flights as the standard, not the exception. No more middle seats on commercial airlines. No more getting recognized in airports while you're exhausted and trying to recover between games. No more sitting in coach next to someone eating fast food while you're supposed to be an elite professional athlete. Charter travel isn't just a luxury, it's about recovery. injury prevention, and treating players like they're worth the investment. The proposal also addresses real-life concerns that go beyond basketball. Language around pregnancy protections gives players more control, including the ability to refuse trades during and after pregnancy. That's not a minor detail. That's acknowledging that women's careers don't pause for biology, and the league needs to build structures that reflect that reality. On top of that, the league floated adding 2 developmental roster spots per team. That's not just a feel-good gesture. That's more jobs, more opportunities for players who are on the bubble, more runway for late bloomers who need time to develop instead of getting cut and disappearing from the system entirely.
Important. The CBA was announced in the middle of January 2020, a month after it had been agreed to. It could easily take 2 months from when a new CBA is reached to get the start of free agency, which was supposed to begin last month. With a massive salary raise expected in a new CBA, 80% of players in the league are free agents this offseason, which makes this the biggest opportunity for player movement in the history of the WNBA. A delay would hurt both sides, as every game that is missed, revenue would be lost, as would sponsorships, television money, and fan support. Ogwumike, who is in her 3rd term,
it keeps talent in the pipeline instead of losing it to overseas leagues or early retirement. And then there are the smaller touches, things like every player getting a free league pass subscription. It's symbolic, sure, but it's also part of a broader package that shows the league is willing to invest in quality of life across the board. So when people act like the owners are stonewalling and offering nothing, that's just not accurate. The league put 37 specific concessions on the table. Real money, real improvements, real protections. The question isn't whether the owners moved. It's whether they moved far enough on the one issue that's keeping everything frozen. Revenue sharing. Strip away all the noise, all the public statements, all the back and forth about respect and timing, and you land on one issue: revenue sharing. Specifically, the players want a percentage of gross revenue, similar to what NBA players get, and that's where the entire negotiation hits a wall. Here's why that matters. The NBA model works because the NBA prints money. The league generates billions in revenue, and after you account for operating costs, there's still a massive pile of cash left over to split between owners and players. Basketball-related income gets divided up according to a agreed-upon percentage, and everyone walks away paid. It's clean. It's sustainable. It works because the underlying business supports it. The WNBA isn't there yet. Reports suggest the league is still operating at a loss, even after the best season in its history. Record attendance, record viewership, Caitlin Clark bringing in casual fans who'd never watched a game before. All of that momentum, all of that attention, and the league still finished the year in the red. That's not a criticism of the product. It's just the financial reality of a league that's still building toward profitability. So when the union pushes for a large percentage of gross revenue, they're essentially...
And when the owners resubmit the same proposal they submitted before the players... This would be the funny thing. If the owners, just like the players send in a proposal to the owners say, fuck no. The players send them the same thing. The owners say, I'm not even going to respond.
Asking the owners to guarantee a slice of income before expenses get paid. And expenses in professional sports aren't minor line items. We're talking about travel, facilities, staffing, marketing, insurance, arena costs, operational overhead. All of it has to get covered before anyone sees a distributable profit. If the league is already losing money, locking in a fixed percentage of gross revenue doesn't create more money. It just shifts who has to cover the shortfall. The owners are offering revenue sharing tied to net revenue, which is what's left after the league actually pays its bills. From their perspective, that makes sense. You share the surplus once there is a surplus. You don't promise a percentage of income that doesn't exist yet as profit, but from the player's perspective, that feels like getting paid in leftovers. It feels like the league is saying, trust us, we'll take care of expenses first, and then maybe you'll see something extra. That's the philosophical divide. The players see gross revenue sharing as a matter of fairness and equality. They look at the NBA and ask why their league should operate under a different model. They feel like they're being told to wait until the business is more stable, but they've been waiting for decades. The owners see it as a matter of math. They're not refusing to share revenue out of spite. They're saying the current financials don't support the model the players are demanding. Union leadership has framed it clearly. Once revenue sharing gets solved, everything else moves fast. That tells you the rest of the deal is basically done.
More, because this is an emotional bunch here. I like that, Bane. The owners are just going to submit the same proposal they submitted before the Players Association's December proposal. How funny would that be? Now, Nneka Ogwumike was down there in Athletes Limited. In hindsight, now we know that they sent a proposal. But let's just read along, shall we? President Nneka Ogwumike and WNBA staff were in Nashville last night, where they held a players-only meeting with AU players, including executive committee members Brianna Turner and Alicia Clark.
Salaries, travel, protections, working conditions, all of that is close or already agreed upon. But this one issue, this fight over gross versus net, is holding the entire CBA hostage, and neither side is showing signs of budging. Here's where the union's strategy starts to fall apart under scrutiny. They can't seem to decide whether the 6-week silence was a slap in the face or a strategic gift. And trying to play both angles at the same time is costing them credibility with the people who are actually paying attention. For weeks, the dominant narrative from union leadership was clear. The owners ghosted them. Radio silence for 42 days. Disrespect. A power play designed to remind the players who really runs things. And that story resonated because it felt true. When you're reaching out constantly and getting nothing back, it does feel like you're being dismissed. It does feel like the other side doesn't value your time or your voice. That frustration is real, and the union leaned into it hard. They framed the delay as evidence that the league wasn't negotiating in good faith. But then, almost in the same breath, you hear different messaging. Leadership starts saying the 6-week window was actually valuable. It gave them time to meet with players across the league, time to gather feedback, time to review the fine print of previous proposals, time to organize and build solidarity. Suddenly, the delay that was supposedly an insult becomes a resource they were happy to have. So which is it? Was the silence a deliberate freeze-out meant to assert dominance? Or was it a convenient pause that let the union do the groundwork they needed? Because you can't credibly claim both. If the delay was genuinely disrespectful and harmful, then call it out and keep the pressure on. If it was actually useful and gave you time to strategize, then say that and move forward. But when you toggle between the two depending on which audience you're speaking to, people start to notice the inconsistency. That contradiction matters because it undermines trust, not just with the owners, but with fans, media, and even some players.
They need to be realistic and sign that on the dotted line. Annie, you are too old guard positive for me. Oh, call out these delusional, entitled, childish, unprofessional, low IQ players still listening to the union leaders that want the season canceled. Wake up, fools. Yeah, that's a good point. The executive committee, they're really capitalizing on the lack of understanding that some players have. They're really taking advantage.
It starts to look less like principled negotiation and more like tactical messaging that shifts based on convenience. And once that perception sets in, everything else the union says gets filtered through skepticism. Are they really standing on principle? Or are they playing a narrative game that serves leadership more than it serves the majority of players? It also creates confusion about what the union actually wants. If the delay was so damaging, why aren't they pushing harder for urgent resolution? If they're truly ready to go to war over revenue sharing, why spend time talking about how helpful the extra weeks were? The mixed signals make it harder for players to stay aligned, harder for fans to pick a side, and easier for critics to point out that the messaging doesn't hold together under pressure. The reality is this: professional negotiations are complicated, and it's normal for perspectives to evolve. But when you're asking players to risk their season and fans to stay patient, consistency matters. And right now, the union story keeps changing depending on who's listening. That's not strength. That's a crack in the foundation that gets wider the longer this drags on. May 8th isn't a suggestion. It's not a soft target that can slide a few weeks if things get complicated. It's the locked-in season opener, and right now, that date is barreling toward everyone like a freight train, while the entire league sits frozen in negotiation limbo. And here's the problem. Before a single game tips off, there's a massive operational checklist that has to get completed. None of it can start until there's a signed CBA. And every day without that signature pushes the league closer to catastrophe. First on the list, expansion. Toronto and Portland are joining the league, which sounds exciting until you realize that integrating two new franchises isn't something you do over a weekend. There's an expansion draft that has to happen so those teams can actually build rosters. Existing teams have to prepare protection lists. Front offices have to coordinate. None of that can move forward while the CBA sits unsigned because nobody knows what the roster rules or salary structures will look like. Then there's free agency, which is supposed to be the biggest player movement period in WNBA history. And that's not hype. 80% of the league's players are currently free agents. 80%. Most of them opted out of their contracts specifically because they expected a new CBA to unlock higher salaries and better terms. They made that bet assuming a deal would get done in time for them to cash in. Instead, they're stuck in limbo. No team can make offers. No player can sign. No agents can negotiate. The entire market is on pause, and every week that passes is a week those players can't plan their lives. After free agency, there's the rookie draft. New talent is supposed to enter the system, get slotted into teams, and start preparing for their professional careers. But you can't hold a draft without knowing what the salary scale looks like, or how many roster spots are available. So that's frozen too. And then there are training camps. Teams need to book facilities, coordinate schedules, bring in staff, and get players ready for the season. But if you don't know when free agency ends or when rosters finalize, you can't plan a camp. Everything is contingent on everything else, and the foundation holding it all up is a CBA that still doesn't exist. Meanwhile, the business side is panicking. Sponsors need to know there's going to be a season so they can activate partnerships and plan campaigns. Broadcasters need confirmation so they can lock in schedules and promote games. Ticket sellers need certainty so fans aren't buying season passes on a prayer. Every piece of the revenue engine requires clarity, and right now, there is none. The union keeps saying the season will happen. Leadership keeps projecting confidence. But confidence isn't a plan. Saying we'll figure it out doesn't make logistics move faster. And the closer we get to May 8th without a signed deal, the more likely we're looking at a shortened season, a compressed schedule, or worse, a work stoppage that turns the league's best year ever into a completely wasted opportunity. The calendar doesn't care about leverage. It just keeps moving. Here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody in union leadership wants to say out loud. If there's a work stoppage, the WNBA doesn't exist in a vacuum. There are hundreds, maybe thousands, of elite women's basketball players around the world who would jump at the chance to take a roster spot. And the idea that every single one of them would turn down that opportunity out of solidarity is pure fantasy. Look at who's out there. Players grinding in Europe, Asia, and Australia, putting up numbers in leagues that pay decently but don't offer anything close to the visibility or long-term security of the WNBA. Players who went undrafted or got cut and have been waiting for years for another shot. College stars who aged out of draft eligibility and never got their chance. All of them are watching this negotiation closely. And if the league's doors open because current players are holding out, some of them are walking through without hesitation. That's not betrayal. That's survival. Professional sports careers are brutally short, and opportunities don't wait around for political solidarity. If a team offers a real contract with real money and a legitimate chance to compete at the highest level, plenty of players will say yes. They'll deal with the backlash. They'll handle the social media hate. They'll take the labels that come with crossing a line. Because for a lot of them, this might be the only chance they ever get. And fans can sense that tension. Scroll through the reactions whenever union statements drop on social media, and you'll see it. A lot of people aren't angry at the players. They're confused. They're asking why this is still stuck when the league has already offered massive salary increases, charter travel, pregnancy protections, developmental roster spots, and a long list of quality of life improvements. The public sees those concessions and wonders what the holdup is. And when the answer comes back as revenue sharing model, something that sounds like an accounting dispute rather than a fundamental rights issue, support starts to crack. It's not that fans don't want players to get paid. It's that fans don't want to lose a season over a fight about gross versus net revenue when the league isn't even profitable yet. And the longer the union frames this as all or nothing, the more people start wondering if leadership is overplaying their hand. Because here's the leverage reality. The union's power depends entirely on the belief that the league can't function without the current roster. But if replacement players step in and games actually happen, even if the quality dips, that leverage evaporates instantly. Fans might complain, but they'll still watch. Sponsors might grumble, but they'll still pay. Broadcasters might adjust expectations, but they'll still air the games. The union is betting everything on the idea that the league won't risk its credibility by using replacement players. But if this drags into late April with no deal in sight, and the choice becomes losing an entire season or playing with whoever's willing to suit up, don't be shocked if the owners make that call. And once they do, the negotiation is over. In any standoff, the side that can afford to wait the longest usually wins. And in this fight, the math is brutally simple. The owners have diversified portfolios, the players have basketball. That imbalance is everything. The people who own WNBA teams aren't depending on the league to pay their mortgages. They've got tech investments, real estate empires, hedge funds, other sports franchises. The WNBA is part of their portfolio, not the whole thing. If the season gets delayed or canceled entirely, it hurts their investment, sure, but it doesn't put their kids' college funds at risk. It doesn't threaten their lifestyle. They can sit in their offices, check the calendar, and wait for the pressure to build on the other side of the table. The players don't have that luxury. For most of them, their WNBA salary is the primary income. Some supplement it with overseas contracts, endorsements, or off-season work. But the core financial stability comes from suiting up and playing games. And professional basketball careers are short, painfully short. You might get 10 years if you're lucky and stay healthy. More realistically, you're looking at 5 to 7 years of prime earning potential before your body breaks down or younger talent pushes you out. Every season that gets lost is a season you never get back. It's not just missed paychecks. It's missed development, missed exposure, missed opportunities to build your brand while people are actually paying attention. And if you're a fringe roster player, a lost season might mean you never get another contract. Teams move on. Rosters turn over. The window closes faster than anyone wants to admit. That's why time isn't neutral in this fight. Every week that passes without a deal, the pressure shifts a little more toward the players. Union leadership can talk about solidarity and holding the line. But behind closed doors, players are doing the math. They're looking at their bank accounts. They're thinking about overseas options that won't wait forever. They're wondering if fighting for a revenue-sharing model the league can't support yet is really worth sacrificing the 1 year when everyone's actually watching. And that creates internal tension the union doesn't want to acknowledge publicly. Because not every player is on the same page. Stars with endorsement deals and long-term security can afford to hold out longer. Role players living paycheck to paycheck can't. Veterans approaching retirement are thinking differently than rookies just starting out. The idea that 150+ players are all perfectly aligned on strategy is a fiction that gets harder to maintain the closer we get to May. The owners know this. They're counting on it. That's why they can afford to go silent for 6 weeks and not panic. They're betting that eventually, enough players will decide that taking the massive improvements already on the table is smarter than gambling the entire season on a principle that doesn't match the current financial reality. So the question isn't really who blinks first. It's how long the union can hold together before the cracks become too obvious to ignore. Strip away the rhetoric, and what you're left with is a clash between two completely different frameworks for thinking about this deal. On one side, there's what players deserve in principle. On the other, there's what the league can actually sustain right now. And those two things aren't the same. Nobody with any credibility disputes that WNBA players deserve better compensation. They're elite athletes performing at the highest level of their sport. They're generating attention, driving ratings, filling arenas, and creating value that goes way beyond what their current paychecks reflect. The principle is sound. The moral argument is airtight. These women should be paid like the professionals they are. and the league should operate with structures that reflect their worth. But principle doesn't pay the bills. And that's where this gets messy. Because when the union points to the NBA and says, "We want that model," they're not wrong to want it. The NBA's revenue-sharing structure works beautifully for players. It's transparent. It's fair. It guarantees a significant percentage of basketball-related income goes directly into player pockets. It's everything a union should be fighting for. Except the NBA can afford it because the NBA is swimming in profit. The financial foundation supporting that model is rock solid. The WNBA isn't there yet. Reports suggest the league is still operating at a loss, which means demanding an NBA-style gross revenue split isn't just ambitious. It's asking the owners to promise a percentage of income that doesn't exist as surplus. You're not splitting profits. You're asking ownership to cover a bigger guaranteed payout while the business itself is still in the red. That's the practical problem that no amount of moral clarity can solve. You can deserve something and still not be able to get it right now because the underlying economics don't support it. It's not about fairness, it's about math. And math doesn't care about what should be true. It only cares about what is true. The smart play, the one that actually benefits the most players in the most tangible way, is taking the transformative wins that are available today. Max salaries jumping from $249,000 to over $1 million, potentially reaching $2 million. Charter travel, pregnancy protections, developmental roster spots, minimum salary increases across the board. These aren't crumbs. This is a fundamental restructuring of how players experience life in the WNBA. It's the kind of progress that changes careers and creates stability for hundreds of athletes who desperately need it. And here's the key. Taking that deal now doesn't mean giving up on the bigger fight. It means being strategic about timing. Build the league's revenue base over the next few years. Let the financial picture improve. Let the profitability actually materialize. Then come back to the table in the next negotiation with leverage that's backed by real numbers instead of projections. Push for gross revenue sharing when the league can actually afford to deliver it without turning every season into a subsidy. That's not surrender. That's playing the long game. But right now, union leadership seems more focused on winning a philosophical battle than securing a practical victory. And if they're not careful, they'll end up with neither. So here we are. All the posturing, all the silence, all the proposals and counter-proposals. And it all comes down to one simple choice that's going to define what happens next. Is this fight worth the cost? Not the cost in principle or in theory, but the actual, measurable cost that lands on real people with real careers and real bills to pay. Because let's be clear about what's at stake. We're not talking about a minor disagreement over language or a few percentage points on a bonus structure. We're talking about potentially losing games, potentially shortening a season that was supposed to be the biggest in league history, potentially wasting the momentum that Caitlin Clark and the entire 2024 season built, potentially watching casual fans who finally started paying attention drift away because the league couldn't get its act together. And for what? For a revenue-sharing model that sounds great on paper but doesn't align with the league's current financial reality. For a structure borrowed from the NBA that only works when the underlying business is printing money, not when it's still operating at a loss. For a principle that makes perfect sense in a boardroom debate but falls apart when you actually run the numbers. The players deserve more. That's not up for discussion. They deserve better pay, better conditions, better respect, and a league that treats them like the elite professionals they are. And based on everything we've seen, a lot of that is already on the table. Not all of it. Not perfect, but enough to represent the single biggest leap forward in WNBA history. Enough to transform careers. Enough to create real financial security for players who've been grinding for years on contracts that barely covered rent. So the question every player needs to ask themselves is this: do we take the massive wins available right now, lock in generational progress, and keep the league moving while it has the spotlight? Or do we risk it all, gamble away a season, and bet everything on a model that might only be sustainable 3 or 4 years from now when the revenue base actually supports it? Because time doesn't wait, momentum doesn't pause, and careers definitely don't get longer just because you're fighting for a cause. If this turns into a full work stoppage, The people who suffer first, and suffer most, aren't the owners with diversified income streams. It's the players who need those checks. It's the role players who might never get another contract. It's the league itself, which finally broke through into mainstream relevance and is now flirting with the idea of torching it all over an accounting dispute. Both sides think they're protecting something important. Both sides believe time is on their side. But the clock is ticking toward May 8th, and every day without a deal is another day closer to disaster. Someone has to decide whether this stand is worth the collateral damage. Someone has to blink, and whoever does it first might actually be the side that saves the league from itself. Stay locked in with my channel, Simply Explained, your home for the truth behind the WNBA headlines.